how do we finally beat stress, worry, doubt? Is that even possible?
If we start to think about doubt as the signal that this is where I'm building some new capability, this is where I have to learn something new. Doubt is a normal part of life. We can't escape it.
Bidhan Parmar, professor of business ethics,
explores how doubt and worry
can guide us toward better choices
and stronger leadership.
How can we better differentiate between useful doubt and destructive overthinking?
When we're in that phase of destructive overthinking, we're constantly ruminating on the worst case scenario. It's kind of pressing on us and we don't know how to move forward. Productive doubt, usually at a smaller scale. So we think about it not as, can I shadow someone who's doing that job currently? Can I pick up the phone and ask them about their day so I can learn? So it's smaller in scope.
What about worry? Is there a radical doubt approved method of pumping the brakes?
I think one of the best ways of pumping the brakes when you find yourself worrying over and over again is to...
Dr. Bobby Parmar, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm great. It's great to meet you.
Likewise.
I'm very excited for your book, Radical Doubt. It's a really cool and interesting and timely topic. How to make sense of all the uncertainty in the world.
Yeah.
And the uncertainty within.
Absolutely. It's something that I've been working on for the last 15 plus years and, kind of shocked to see how timely it's become.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, let's just dive right in. People are experiencing stress, worry, doubt in, I think, record proportions today. Mm-hmm. We're sort of at this apex where, we're at an AI revolution. The political division now among people is causing a lot of people to wonder what's coming next and to be really uncomfortable with just sitting with that emotion. So how do we finally beat stress, worry, doubt? Is that even possible?
Well, I think there are different levels of doubt, and there's an optimal level of doubt that can really help us learn. I think about doubt as a signal that, growth and learning is possible. A metaphor I like to use with my students and the executives I work with is, look, when you go to the gym, the first couple of reps you're warming up, but by the time you hit that 9th, 10th, 11th rep, you're feeling some burn, right? That's the part you're actually getting stronger. And if we start to think about doubt as the signal that this is where I'm building some new capability, this is where I have to learn something new, then it isn't as paralyzing as if we expect to have the right answer all the time and then we experience doubt. Doubt becomes this aversive feeling that we have. And I think a big part of the problem is that the way we're all educated is we learn that we're smart when we get the right answer. And then when we encounter decisions or moments when we experience doubt, we don't know what to do. And it makes us feel inferior or stupid, and we don't know how to manage that set of emotions and how to be productive in that context. And so what I'm trying to do with this book and with my research is to help people identify that doubt is a normal part of life. We can't escape it. Chasing certainty is a fool's errand. There's just never going to be perfect certainty, and as soon as we find it, the world is going to change. And there's some negative impacts of certainty in particular. And so, for example, it makes us blind to pitfalls in our decision making. It makes us less tolerant of different perspectives. Think about the vitriol that we see on social media, right? It allows us to feel justified in exercising power over others. Like, I have the right answer, you don't have the right answer, I get to tell you what to do. And doubt, I think, can give us a healthy dose of humility to try to figure things out when we don't know what to do.
Doubt seldom shows up on the multiple choice test, right?
Exactly.
That's seldom a sufficient response when faced with challenge. So I don't know, what do you think it's going to take from a societal standpoint, or maybe even the way that we're brought up, the way that we're educated, where doubt becomes something that's more, I guess, rewarded for? Yeah,
I think part of it is learning to see that doubt plus fear is some kind of paralysis or avoidance. But doubt plus motivation is curiosity. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're someone starting a new business or launching something new, whether it's a book or your own company, you have to wrestle with doubt all the time because there's no playbook. And what I've noticed over the years is my students, my children, so many folks that are going through school do really well when there's directions and instructions. And the second the directions go away, they don't know what to do. They freeze. They have no idea how to be the A student or the gold star student in that moment. And I think that there's a point in all of our lives where we get there. Many of my students go on to become senior executives, and then on the way there's a point in their career where all of a sudden the answer isn't put in front of them with a playbook or a rule book. They've got to triangulate between what's happening in strategy and what's happening in accounting and what's happening in operations and figure out, how do I put all these things together to move forward?
Does social media and the impact that that's having on our collective psyches, does that worry you at all? I was reading an article recently, I think it was in the New York Times, that Gen Z, spends so much time on TikTok, social media in general, that when kids now are getting jobs and have to work, for example, at retail, which is like an entry level job many of us, have gone through, they don't really know how to respond to customers like in those typical face-to-face interactions.
Yeah, it worries me a lot, actually, because I think many of the social media algorithms are created to capture our attention. And the great way of capturing our attention is giving us things that we absolutely agree with, whether it's a picture of a cute kitten that we say, "Aw," or whatever it might be, or things that we absolutely hate or find disgusting. And both of those things really capture our attention. And so part of what's happening when we're using social media is we're training our attention to the kinds of things that are worth paying attention to. And so when something is ambiguous or uncertain, we're just not used to dealing with that. I worry that heavy use of social media can lead to something that I call the addiction to feeling right. Right? We just feel so comfortable having our worldview confirmed. And social media is really good at confirmation. It's not really good at conversation. And those are the kinds of things that you have to learn, whether you're dealing with a customer at a register for the first time, someone who disagrees with you, a client who maybe be having an issue with something that you've produced. You've really got to learn to step back, have a conversation, understand their perspective, articulate your perspective. And that it's not just a cognitive idea, right? It's just as much a social and emotional thing. A lot of times, something I'm trying to expunge from my own vocabulary is this idea of sitting with doubt or sitting with uncertainty, because I think it makes it seem way too passive. Nobody wants to sit and kind of stew in a negative experience or negative emotion, right? But what actually happens under conditions of uncertainty, when we study people who do this well, they're actually engaged. What they're doing is they're naming the thing that they don't understand. They're saying to themselves, what could I do to learn about what might happen? It's kind of an active engagement with that uncertainty that helps them move forward. It's not just a sitting back and waiting for things to resolve themselves.
Is there like a neuroscientific explanation for why doubt tends to make us feel and uncertainty tend to make us feel so uncomfortable?
Yeah, for sure. So just to step back a little bit, I'll do a little bit of setup and then we'll dig into the answer to your question. So the brain has these 3 interconnected circuits that help us explain our experience of certainty and uncertainty. So when we think about what creates our experience of certainty, typically we think about, I call it our pursue system, right? Another name for this, our mesolimbic pathway or our reward system. There's something there and later in the future that we want, whether it's being physically fit, a donut, time with a friend, all of that, and we exert voluntary discretionary effort to go get that thing. And because it's a clear thing we want to pursue, all the other considerations around that kind of blur. It focuses us in order to get us to get up and go after that thing. The same is true for our protect system, but instead of something that we want to pursue and go after because we think it'll be rewarding, it's something we find threatening or aversive. And so we find ourselves fleeing or running or fighting in situations that could be physically and socially threatening. And most of the time, this kind of approach avoidance response predicts a lot of our behavior. And many of our most intuitions are framed around approach and avoidance. But many times, there's also a conflict within and among these 2 systems. So sometimes there's a stimulus that you simultaneously want to approach and avoid. Someone you're not sure is a friend or a foe, right? Sometimes there are stimuli, there are 2 positive stimuli. You're not sure, should I vacation in Hawaii or the Bahamas? They're both amazing. I don't know which one. Or 2 things you want to avoid. And so when there are discrepancies among the signals that these 2 systems are sending you, the 3rd system comes online. This is what I call our pause and piece together system. Others have called it our behavioral inhibition system. And what this does is it gets us to say, wait a second, I don't have a clear way of moving forward here. And it recruits our attention, it recruits working memory to look around and say, what should I do? How can I learn? But that feeling of, I don't know what to do, we've come to associate with, I'm stupid, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough. Rather than saying, wait a second, this is an opportunity for me to get a little bit clearer about what's going on and how I can take the next step. So part of the reason that there's a long scientific kind of history on finding uncertainty aversive. And part of the reason that is because the brain has this built-in connection between our protect system and our pause and piece together system. In order to protect us, if we were in the environment kind of trying to, think about us in the savannah, trying to figure out what's going on with a particular plant. We could also be at risk from predators or other threats. So what happens is the longer we spend pausing and piecing together what's in the environment, the likelihood of our threat increases. So the brain has this built-in system to say, look around, make sure you're okay. Why don't we move to this other thing that might be more dopaminergically rewarding? And so by making that searching and learning over time feel aversive, it makes sure you don't get stuck figuring something out and increasing the risk to your life.
Yeah, so it's inherently riskier.
Exactly.
It made me think of the when you are attempting to approach like a stranger to ask them out.
Yeah.
Just how uncomfortable that feeling can be.
Absolutely.
Which is probably the closest your average modern human gets to, to real threat, right? I mean, it's like there are risky things that we do every single day, but maybe they're risky and we have some degree of comfortable distance from whatever it is, from the threat or from the danger, perceived or not, or real rather. But yeah, like making the approach to a stranger in a supermarket to try to ask them out. I mean, that's terrifying.
Oh, absolutely. Like, you get a punch to your stomach. It just feels like your throat goes dry, like
Yeah.
all of those things. And in part because what's happening is we're imagining the worst case scenario. We're imagining this person is going to reject me. And social rejection, we know, is experienced as incredibly painful, right? So even anticipating being rejected is really painful. But in those moments, those are opportunities to think through, like, what if this goes really right? What's the worst that could happen, right? And so I like to think about it, if I haven't said already, like doubt plus fear is paralysis. And doubt plus motivation is curiosity. And so when we can find ways of turning up the volume on that motivation, yeah, I'm feeling nervous here, but this might be a really cool person. We might really hit it off.
I also feel like doubt plus curiosity is motivation.
Yeah, we can work the mathematical algorithm in lots of ways here. Yeah.
I mean, that would motivate me to, like, doubt plus curiosity would motivate me to actually make the move as opposed to just like cowering away in fear.
I think what's happening there is that you're imagining some future benefit. What makes us curious is that there's something good around the corner, whereas what makes us fearful is there's got to be something terrible around the corner. I'm going to be rejected, or this isn't going to go well.
It's a really simple mindset shift to overcome doubt.
Yeah, and I think it's something that's really powerful. In psychology, there's all these different forces that kind of affect our behavior, right? So we can think about our stable personality traits. We can think about features of the situation. But this element of psychology that's kind of how we think and what we believe about the world is a place where we have agency. It's a place where we get to choose, you know what, this is how I want to approach the situation. It's a place where I think we have a little bit more free will.
How did you arrive at these ideas? I mean, tell us a little bit about your background.
So by training, I'm a social psychologist and a moral philosopher, and I teach at a business school called the Darden Business School at the University of Virginia, where now I'm in the beginning of my 18th year.
Wow.
So time flies. It's gone by in a blink of an eye. And part of my job is to research and help emerging executives and current executives think through really difficult decisions. And one of the things I noticed is that they weren't really good at the hard ones. They were really good when there were directions. When, this is how you do a strategic analysis, or this is how you create a cash flow statement. Like if you gave them the steps, they were great at it. I mean, these are really smart, hardworking folks. But the second you got these conflicting signals about, wait a second, I've got these values that conflict. I want to do what's right by my shareholders, but I don't want to harm my employees. They didn't know what to do. And they turned those complex decisions into simple decisions. And so I got really curious about how do we help them understand this complexity? And what I noticed is that there's lots of tools and lots of techniques out in the, kind of decision-making guru land, right? But what happens is that when people don't know how to deal with doubt, they try something, they try to put a recipe together, they struggle, and then they give up and they go after the next silver bullet solution. And so what I came to understand is that, look, we got to help people embrace doubt and use it as a catalyst for learning so that they can make the most of the tools and techniques that are out there to help them. But if we don't go after that, then people are stuck on this hamster wheel of trying one thing, it not working, not knowing how to adapt and pivot, and then trying the next thing. And it's just sad to think about a life where you've got these great intentions for who you want to be and how you want to show up, whether those are career goals, family goals, health and wellness goals, but not being able to actually make tangible, consistent progress because you give up way too soon.
What's the relationship between your research and creativity? Because it makes me think of like the tendency for certain people, maybe with certain neurotypes, to be really prone to sticking to that, going from point A to point B to point C to point D, and then struggling when plans don't, when reality doesn't go according to plan.
Yeah.
But then I think about like myself and other friends who are artists, and taking risks and kind of veering outside of the whatever predetermined path had been seems par for the course.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's such a great question. And I think at the intersection of doubt and creativity is something really interesting, right? That it's a place where we get to practice our agency. And some of the exact same dimensions that we see show up at different phases of decision making, whether it's framing problems, generating creative alternatives, kind of testing and implementing. Those skills show up at multiple phases. And creativity is a great example because it's a skill that you can learn, right? There's a set of practices and processes that you can do to create more novel alternatives that other people can't see or other people didn't. But what happens is that the first time you try it, it feels uncomfortable. You give up. Right? So as someone who teaches creativity, I've got to work with my MBA students to stick with it. You've got to try a couple times and then something really cool emerges, but you can't predict when it's going to emerge. But if you give up the second it doesn't feel like I'm making progress, then you're not going to see that great insight.
I feel like it requires a degree of like meta thinking in a way. Like oftentimes when I'm approaching a problem that needs to be solved in my own life or in my business, I ask myself, I look at the problem, and then I try to assess what my own instinct would be in terms of solving that problem. But then I generally will always recognize that that's the obvious. Like I'm able to parse the obvious approach of attack from, okay, well, let's see what happens if we were just to like step aside, take like one step to the left and look at the same problem, but from like a different vantage point. Like to me, that's very like, I guess, innate, very intuitive. But I would imagine that's not the case for a lot of others.
Well, it's a skill that's learned. And I mean, I think you're exactly right to point out that when we look at success in uncertain dynamic situations, it's predicted by two main factors. One is this having a broad set of things you can try, right? So if you've only got one thing you can do, this kind of meta thinking doesn't help because what else are you going to do? But if you can try multiple things, if you have what we would call a broad repertoire, then that helps you to step back and say, what tool in my toolbox is getting me closer to where I want to get? This one isn't doing it, or this one everyone uses. What about this other one? And so, I mean, the technical term here is metacognition, plus a broad repertoire allows us to kind of zoom out and say what's working, what's not working. And I keep coming back to the idea that these are skills that people can learn. In psychology, I think we overestimate how much someone's fixed traits actually predict about their behavior. And too often I hear folks say like, I'm not really good at creative problem solving, or I'm not good at dealing with doubt, or I'm not the kind of person who. And that actually masks, it's an excuse not to dig in and do the work. So when we look at the literature on personality psychology, when we think about things like extroversion and introversion and creativity, all those kinds of things, they have some predictive value, but it's a very small predictive value. In a sample, someone's personality traits only predict about 10% of the behavior in the sample. It means 90% of it isn't predicted by those stable traits. And so that suggests that perhaps there's other things at work here. And one of the things that we believe is at work here is people's mindsets, the way they think about things, and their repertoire. Practicing a set of skills. Think about your own creative journey. At the beginning, this probably felt kind of hard or aversive in different ways, but as you got really good at it, as you got success, as you started to find different ways of flexing that part of yourself, it started to feel more comfortable. And so what we often think about as someone's personality trait is just a lack of experience and practice.
How do you teach these skills? Like, how do you get somebody who's set in their ways, well into adulthood, to approach the problems in their lives differently?
Yeah, I think a great way is by watching others and seeing what they do and how they might do it differently. So at the Darden Business School, I run a lab with some of my colleagues called the Experiential Leadership Development Lab. And after having taught leadership for 18 plus years, I've come to believe that leadership is one of those things that's really easy to talk about but hard to do. everyone can give you the 3 bullet points on why trust is important and how you got to engage stakeholders. But I don't really see my students growing when we talk about those things or when I give them the bullet points from the latest research. So what happens in our lab is that students walk in, they read a short, difficult scenario. Maybe it's a negotiation that requires some creative insight. Maybe they've got to give difficult feedback to someone who isn't performing well. They've got to mediate a contentious meeting between 2 different stakeholder groups. And so they read this half page to page. We outfit them with different physiological sensors, so we're measuring their level of stress in real time. And then I have a group of actors that walk in, and the students have to do it. They have to fire someone, or they have to mediate the difficult conversation, or if they give someone difficult feedback. Everything is recorded, and they watch it back. So they get a video file that has them, and scrolling at the bottom is their stress response. So I can say, Max, you started out really great, and then they started to cry, and you fell apart. Let's try it again. And so in addition to watching yourself and building a bit of that awareness of, hey, this is how I approached it. I thought that was the right move at this time, but it turns out I didn't notice it from their perspective. You also get to watch a couple of your peers. And so when I watch your video, I'm like, Max handled that so beautifully. How come I didn't think of that? It gets me excited about adding that to my repertoire. And so when it comes to like adult education, I really think like motivation is a big driver of getting people to learn, and there's nothing more motivating than seeing the effects of your actions. And so it's got to come off of the PowerPoint deck and the lectures and just the easy conversation into the show me, demonstrate the skill.
That's a paradigm shift. Like I think many people would be surprised to hear that filming themselves is actually a valuable tool for building the skill of leadership. But in actuality, I mean, it's so useful in so many areas of life. Like we talk about, obviously, exercise a lot on this show, and filming yourself doing an exercise like can be a really effective way of seeing whether or not you're doing it with proper form. I know for me, being able to watch myself, I mean, I basically live my life on camera at this point, and have for my entire career. But like watching myself has been really useful for me to get better at what it is that I do.
Exactly.
For music, I used to play music, and recording my concerts and myself playing and performing was a really useful thing where I could be like, ooh, I didn't really sound that great during that moment. And then, oh my God, I sounded actually really good there. Let's do more of that. So it's cool being able to apply that to leadership.
It's a really cool technique. And to your point, it's applicable in so many different domains because it gets you to see and experience you from someone else's perspective, right?
So do you recommend, like, I mean, for people that are taking Zoom meetings, trying to get maybe an entrepreneurial dream off the ground, meetings are generally going to be par for the course, recording themselves and watching that meeting over?
Yeah, I think there's lots of ways of going about this. One is maybe practice meetings, right? So where you have someone on your team, you're like, I want to practice making the pitch to you. Let me record that and watch it back. It's a little bit more low stakes. But then if you really want to see how you perform under pressure, you might actually record a live Zoom meeting, obviously with permission from the folks that are in the room, and then watching it back. I felt like I grew a lot as an educator during COVID because we were recording our Zoom classes. And when I would watch them back, that question was kind of messy the way I didn't see that student over there with their hand up. There's just so many things that you notice about yourself. Because when you're in the middle of having that experience, you're having the experience. You're trying to communicate something. You're trying to connect with others, but you don't notice all of these other parts of your experience that are relevant to your audience.
You get better at it, though, over time. It becomes, I think once what it is that you're trying to do becomes, I forget the matrix. It's like once whatever it is that you're attempting to do becomes, you become unconsciously competent, then it becomes easier to step back while you're still in the flow and then be able to, for me, the example that I can use is public speaking.
Yeah.
I've been doing it for 20-something years at this point. But I remember early on, I would not be able to, for example, if I was like thirsty or whatever, like in the middle of a presentation, like I would be so focused on getting through the presentation and hitting all of my talking points. But now, I mean, I feel like I'm much more able to tap into a flow state where, I can like drink a glass of water, I can interact with the audience, I can perceive the room around me, while delivering my talk with pitch perfect accuracy. And even if I don't hit a mark that I want to hit, it doesn't throw me off.
That's right. That's exactly right. I think that by freeing up some of your attention because you've offloaded some of that processing to kind of the more intuitive parts of the brain, you can kind of zoom out. And this is something we notice in experts too, who, when they deal with uncertain, complex situations, part of what they're doing is that they're able to scan the environment more effectively than novices. Part of that is because novices are really caught up in the, oh my gosh, I got to take a sip of water. What do I do? Or what's on my next slide? I forgot. And their attention is really wrapped up in executing the protocol. They haven't offloaded enough of that protocol to subconscious processing to be able to zoom out. But experts can zoom out. Like when you look at expert prosecutors, they're constantly scanning the room to figure out how to amend their arguments. Expert nurses take multiple readings of different types of tests before they make a diagnosis or suggest a course of action. What's really interesting is that experts don't treat their intuition as if it's their decision. It's something that we notice a lot in novices. When a novice has an intuition about a difficult decision, it's got to be this, and here are 3 reasons why. Experts might also have that intuition, but they don't treat it as their decision. They treat it as a hypothesis. So they say to themselves, okay, I'm leaning towards this. What could teach me that I'm wrong? I'm leaning towards this other thing. How could I do this so that I don't get derailed? What are the risks? And so some of that requires offloading some of that processing so you can zoom out enough to assess what else might be going on.
How can we better differentiate between useful doubt and destructive overthinking?
Such an important question. When we're in that phase of destructive overthinking, we're constantly ruminating on the worst case scenario, and doubt feels like this really big thing. It's kind of pressing on us, and we don't know how to move forward. Productive doubt or productive uncertainty is usually at a smaller scale. So we think about it not as, I've got to figure out if I should take this new job, but can I spend a weekend in this city to get a sense of, do I like living there? Can I shadow someone who's doing that job currently? Can I pick up the phone and ask them about their day so I can learn? So it's smaller in scope. The second thing is that the rumination on the negative piece is your brain trying to protect itself from risk, right? And so that's a really good thing. The question, though, is does it stop you from moving forward, or does it inform you in moving forward more wisely? And so when we're thinking about worst case scenarios or thinking about this could happen, if we say to ourselves, okay, well, here's a way that I could mitigate that risk, or here's a way in which I could step forward being sensitive to that particular scenario, then we're in that space where we're using doubt productively. But if it's now an excuse to like, you know what, I want to pack my bags and go home, or this isn't worth doing anymore, then perhaps we're flirting with doubt becoming something that's really unproductive.
So for people who feel as though they chronically are overthinkers, what should they do?
I think part of what is helpful when you're a chronic overthinker is also to think about the positive surprise that's around the corner, right? So what's happening is we're spending a lot of time in our protect system, and it has a really good role, right, to protect us from all kinds of things that could happen. But we've got to make sure to turn up the volume on some of the pursue system too. Why are we doing this? Remembering maybe the people who are benefited by your efforts, thinking about how your skills might grow, right? Thinking about how it might open up other opportunities or other choice for you. Like identifying your purpose and your drivers of intrinsic motivation can help you put those negative things into context and say, it's still worth doing because there's some benefit here too. It's not just all risk. And I'd say the exact same thing to the folks who, on the opposite side, barrel forward saying, you know what, this is going to be great. Let's invest all our money in this startup. And then, they haven't thought about the risks. They haven't validated assumptions. They haven't tested and iterated their way to something that's more effective, right? And so what radical doubt is about being informed by both our pursue system and our protect system to make wise choices, rather than leaning into one or the other in order to run at the issue or run away from the issue.
What about for people who chronically second guess themselves? Who's typically better at decision making? People who chronically second guess themselves, or people who just like go into every decision as if it's a coin toss?
It's a good question. I don't know, actually, but here's a hypothesis. I think part of it depends on the nature of the decision, right? Part of what I want to get people to do is to say, like, not every decision is the same. Some types of decisions we have a lot of experience and wisdom about, and we can trust our gut in those decisions because we have a sense of what could happen and what could not happen, like the risk involved. Other types of decisions are novel. We haven't seen them before, or there's a lot of risk and we want to be careful about them. And so we might have different approaches to different types of decisions. I'd say the overthinker is probably going to do better as long as they're still willing to move forward in novel, unpredictable circumstances because they're thinking about risks. As long as they don't prevent them from moving forward, they're going to be a little bit more wide-eyed. Now, if you're flipping a coin, you might get lucky, but we can't generalize from the few that make it to the many that didn't make it.
That's true. You can't rely on luck.
Yeah.
What about worry for people who are, who lie awake at night saddled with worry? Is there a radical doubt approved method of pumping the brakes?
I think one of the best ways of pumping the brakes when you find yourself worrying over and over again is I find journaling, writing it down. Part of the reason why you keep going over the same thing again and again is it's your brain saying, don't forget this. This is important. Don't forget this. You're rehearsing worst case outcomes so that you can do something when you might meet them. But when you journal, when you write it down, you're externalizing it. You can go back to it. Your brain says, you know what, we're not going to lose that. We're not going to forget because it's written somewhere. The other really powerful thing about journaling is that it allows you to look at your thoughts as a third party. And so when, for example, you might do a free write, just write for 5 minutes nonstop, whatever comes into your mind, you can go back and read it and say, what does this suggest about how my brain works? Isn't it interesting that today I was kind of all over the map? Isn't it interesting that today I really dug into all the things that were wrong about this particular strategy? Maybe I could think about some things that might go right. So it allows you, by journaling and externalizing those worries, it allows you just enough distance to start to regulate them. Part of the problem why you can't get out of the worry is because you're stuck there and you can't find a way to regulate those thoughts and behaviors. And so just creating just enough distance, seeing yourself from a third-party perspective. Another great tactic is saying to yourself, what advice would I give a friend in this moment? So if my friend Max was really worried about this, what would I say to Max? The same strategies at play here because there's a distance between who you are and who I am, and I would treat you in a much more kind way than I might treat myself.
That's
right?
true, yeah.
And so by creating just enough of that distance, you can start to regulate those counterproductive behaviors.
So you're not talking about suppressing worry. You're talking about offloading it so that you can get a better view of it, a different vantage point.
Yeah, I think a lot of the research on suppressing emotions has shown that while in the moment it might make you feel better, those things come back stronger in different ways. And so whether it's anger or worry or anxiety, when you push them away or try to put them out of your mind, they find another way of coming back.
I like the idea of journaling. It reminds me of, it's sort of like when you're trying to organize your sock drawer. It never works when you just try to get in there and organize it without taking everything out of it first. It helps or the junk drawer. Everybody's got a junk drawer in their kitchen, right? It just doesn't work if you're trying to go in there without removing everything first. And then so that you have a view of everything that's actually in there. It's much more effective once you try to actually organize it by taking everything out first, which is sort of like, I guess, the analogy that journaling is offering to me. It's like, okay, let's get this stuff out first, put it on paper so that we can actually shine a light on it and see what's actually going on.
Exactly. I love that metaphor. It's a great one.
It also, I feel like that's like the value of therapy, in my opinion.
That's right. And so another great set of tactics is to have that group of people that you can talk to who will be that third-party perspective for you, right? We talked about what advice would you give your friend. You can also take advice from your friends and really take them seriously when they're like, you know what, maybe we've worried about this for too long. What are the things that we can do if we encounter this problem? And then now that we have those mitigation strategies or safeguards in place, let's focus on some other things. And so having human beings are social creatures. And so there's a lot of things that can go wrong when we're stuck in our heads by ourselves for a long period of time. It's really helpful to get ideas out and to have trusted friends, advisors, mentors, family members who can kind of look at us and say, I think you're making too much of that, or I don't think you're making enough of this.
What do you think about AI? I mean, people are becoming increasingly alienated due to social media and technology, but technology also obviously has provided AI, which I think is incredible and is revolutionizing so many aspects of life. I'm sure that I would predict that the response is somewhere, in the realm of, well, it's a double-edged sword like all tools. But what role would you say technology and AI is having, on our mental health, on our connection or disconnection from one another, and ultimately our ability to cope with stress and worry?
Yeah.
So
One critical principle in how we manage uncertainty and doubt is that when we face a choice or when we're framing a choice or generating options, we want to manage a cycle of divergence and convergence. So we might say to ourselves, what are some different ways I could frame this choice? And then converge on one that feels like the best. We might generate several options and say, okay, but now that we've diverged and generated 5 options, these 2 feel like they're worth testing, and we converge. And so it's really important to spend time divergence and convergence. The trick with AI is that sometimes it pushes us to converge too fast. And this was like a big topic a couple years ago when we compared AI to Google search, right? Because the idea for Google search is it gave you multiple options and then it forced you by giving you the divergence to think about why might I converge? Why might I pick one link versus another link, despite the fact that they're only on page 1, because whoever goes to page 2 on a Google search, right?
True.
But AI doesn't give you multiple options. It gives you a option. And so it forces us to converge very quickly, which means that just like thinking about addicted to feeling right, we don't feel comfortable diverging as much anymore. And so when we're having a conversation and I disagree with you, it's harder for me to try to reconcile those perspectives because I just want you to get with my perspective a lot faster. And so that's something, I'm really excited about the potential of AI to help us learn. I think about it as, technology in the gym. If it can help us grow our skills and get better at connecting with others, I'm all about it. We've got to be careful about when it atrophies those skills, when it substitutes for building skill, and when it actually helps us build skill.
Have you seen the research coming out showing that it's actually contributing in many ways, particularly when people are using it as therapy, to negative emotions, actually reinforcing doubt and the like? I think attributed to its tendency to glaze, which I could be wrong, but if I recall correctly, the new version of ChatGPT in particular has been sort of reoriented to do that less. But nonetheless, a lot of people are using it for therapy, and it's presented problems.
Yeah, I think one real risk here is whether we call it glazing. AI can also act in a very sycophantic way, like trying to assess what you want to hear and saying that again. And if it assesses really you want to stew on this problem, it's going to continue to let you stew on the problem rather than what might be best for you, which is thinking about it in another way. And so it's unclear how these tools will really shape our ability to grow and to deal with doubt effectively, because they can exacerbate some of our worst habits if it thinks that that's what's going to keep us on the platform longer.
Yeah, it's revolutionized so many aspects of my life. Revolutionize maybe a strong word, but it's definitely facilitative of, I think, my literacy in so many different regards, whether it's scientific literacy, literacy of the world and other sort of subject areas that I am curious about, and I think it's way better than Wikipedia. It's way better than Google. Like, it's just very its ability to synthesize large swaths of information into really digestible text. It's amazing. So I've been, to me, there's no area of my business that it hasn't enhanced in some way.
Fascinating.
And life.
Thinking about all these different use cases, right? There are times where, hey, I want to learn about this thing that I don't know about, and using that as a first pass. I'm curious about how people actually use AI as an input into their decision making. I think one of the tricky things here is, just like your intuition, it can substitute for your decision making. And so going back to this idea of your intuition as a hypothesis, thinking about the output of Gen AI as a hypothesis, to go say, all right, here's one way of thinking about this. What would happen if I did that? What are the weaknesses of this? And I think that under those conditions, it can engender much more nuanced and careful thinking that could increase the odds of your success. But if we treat it as, like, this is telling me the right answer and I better just go do this, it can start to atrophy some of those skills.
So I know you work with the world's future leaders, right? Future heads of Fortune 500 companies and the like. But my podcast reaches people from all walks.
Yeah.
So what would you say are the most practical promises of your research, of your work, of your book, ultimately, that listeners, viewers of the show can take away today and start implementing into their lives?
So I think there's a couple of important promises, and then there's a couple of tools to help achieve those promises.
By the way, not saying that the listeners of my show don't have the potential to lead Fortune 500 companies. They all do.
I'm sure they do.
1,000%.
Yes, exactly.
But But no, some of us are working on our fitness goals or raising families or whatever, which are all incredibly amazing, noble, radical goals in and of themselves. But I know you come from this incredible pedigree, this academic, this storied academic background. So yeah, just wondering what we can all be doing today, given your research, to make our way through these tumultuous times.
Yeah, thank you.
And come out on top.
I think there's two important promises to this work. One is that by engaging doubt effectively, we're more likely to achieve our intentions. And so, it's really easy to imagine a world where I have these fitness goals and man, in 6 months, I've hit those fitness goals. We forget to imagine that it's 7:30 at night and I really want to eat this cheeseburger, right? Like there are all these things that we fail to imagine along the way, regardless of what our goal is, whether it's a fitness goal, a relational goal, financial goal, career goal. There's a gap between the world we imagine and the world we encounter. And that makes it hard for us to achieve our goals. But by leveraging doubt effectively, by paying attention to our pursue system and our protect system, we can notice those risks earlier and do something about it. I call it imagining with discipline, right? So not just imagining the best case or the worst case, but trying to get to the most likely case so you can do something about it. So what I hope is that this helps people achieve their goals more effectively. The second potential promise of this work is that, there's a lot of debate right now in psychology about free will. Do we have it? Do we not have it? There are very prominent psychologists saying there's no such thing as free will, and other folks saying, how could you possibly say that? And both of these camps think about free will as a thing that you either have or you don't have. I think the perspective of this book and of my research is that free will is a skill. It's a skill that we can build when we don't know what to do. We can build understanding how to deploy our attention effectively, navigating how to move from one place to another effectively. And so the second promise here is hopefully getting your listeners, getting folks who read the book to a place where they can build the skill to achieve the life that they want, because they're building this capacity to regulate themselves in a complex world.
And it's also very empowering, because you said it's not the immutable characteristics that drive success. It's like it's a skill set.
It's how you think about things. It's the actual practices and technique of what you do, right? And so when we can shine a light on those things and help people grow in those domains, we see tangible results. So practical things. First, we've already talked about being intentional about divergence and convergence. I think that's important no matter what type of decision we're making, right? When we're thinking about our fitness goals or our nutritional goals, thinking about what are some different things I could try here, and then why is this approach the best for me? Where might I get lost in this process? What's going to derail me? What can I do about that particular derailer? There's actually a lot of research in personal change management, that having a goal by itself, unfortunately, doesn't predict a lot of success in behavior change. But what does predict a little bit more success in behavior change is thinking about what we call an implementation intention. That's saying, okay, look, I want to eat really healthy, but when I go out with my friends, that habit drops. So the next time I go out with my friends, what am I going to do when everyone's ordering cheeseburgers and I want to order something else? Like, how am I going to navigate that moment? If you can think ahead to that, then the likelihood of you sticking with your nutritional goals is significantly higher than just saying to yourself, I want to eat in a healthy manner.
Isn't that just called a plan?
But it's a much more nuanced plan that is detailed to what you actually experience. Right? Versus a more general plan where you can convince yourself, oh, I'm getting there, but your actual practice and your goals start to float in different directions.
Interesting. So it's like a plan that incorporates different permutations of how, correct me if I'm wrong, different permutations of how the experience might go.
Yeah, exactly. It's a more realistic plan, right? Because it actually it does something about the actual barriers that you face versus the hypothetical barriers, or, planning is a lot of fun when you don't have to imagine any barriers.
Yeah. AI can be really useful for that.
Yeah, I think that's right. So other things that I think are really actionable and practical is, when we all hit these moments when we don't know how to move forward, just building the habit of going back to why are we doing this? What exactly is my motivation for doing the hard work, whether that's a family member, a friend, a listener, right? Like we all have people that we can close our eyes and imagine their life is going to be better because I did this hard thing. My life is going to be better because I did this hard thing. And just learning how to bring that purpose and motivation back at the right moments can help us persevere. And then the final thing I'd say in terms of a really practical skill, coming back to some of this effective planning, we talked about a version of what's called a premortem. If I fail on my nutritional goals, what's the most likely reason? And what am I going to do about it? But then there's also postmortems. Okay, the last 6 weeks didn't go according to plan. Why? Okay, what am I going to do this next 6 weeks? And so building in learning, like periods of learning, both before and after, can increase the odds that you're going to achieve your intentions, because you don't start to deviate your practice from your intentions for longer and longer periods.
That's like a business term that I think might not be all that familiar to
Yeah,
many.
tell us.
Can you unpack like postmortem and premortem? Most people think about postmortem in the context of death, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, how does that apply to daily decision making?
So these are terms popularized by like really high risk decision makers. Think about like in a hospital setting or like someone, on an aircraft carrier. So you've got a change initiative. You're gonna create a new policy at work, and it's gonna make things better. A premortem is when you sit down with your team and you say, okay, let's imagine that in 5 weeks this thing is dead. What's the most likely cause of death? What are we going to do to prevent that most likely cause of death before we do anything? So it's helping you identify those key barriers, those key things that could derail your goals and intentions, and then build a better strategy so that when you encounter them or to avoid them in the first place, you know what to do. And then a postmortem is the same kind of thing. It's like, okay, we just finished this thing. And it's popularized by what happens in hospitals, right? So you're a surgeon, and unfortunately the patient died on the table. But we don't just move on to the next patient. We stop and we say, okay, what happened? Can we learn from what happened in that surgery post-mortem so that the next time we have this exact same procedure, we don't get to this place again? So let's analyze, what do we expect is going to happen? What actually happened? Why did that happen? And then what does that mean for what we do differently? Another term for this is after-action reviews, really popularized in the military. The military folks are really great at this practice, thinking about those 4 questions.
Super useful. What is one small mindset shift that listeners can implement today that can lower daily stress immediately?
When we think about and when we experience doubt, in that moment when you see the doubt as this is the part of the workout where I'm getting stronger, you'll immediately start to feel that, wait a second, the burden is not as heavy, right? Like it causes you to imagine a future where you're more capable, you're stronger, you're more effective at the task that you're going for. And so building the practice of seeing doubt as a catalyst for learning, as a catalyst for growth, rather than as something that's a derailer or a signal that maybe you're not good enough, smart enough, worthy of what's going on.
Very useful. Did anything while writing the book, because I know you've been steeped in this research for a really long time, but was there anything surprising over the course of writing the book? I'm sure, when putting together a tome such as you have, there's always stuff that stands out as like, I didn't really realize that until really doing a deep dive. But yeah, surprising takeaways, counterintuitive, mind-blowing findings over the course of writing Radical Doubt.
Yeah, I'll mention a couple things about the research, and then one thing about actually the process of writing the book. And so one interesting study that I found that was really critical to this book takes place in the context of entrepreneurs who are starting ventures. And so there are lots of these accelerators that get entrepreneurs together and give them a set of skills and tools and a network of mentors so that they can build their business faster. But these accelerators have 2 different models for the most part. There's one type where an entrepreneur, she gets 20, 30 different mentors at the same time, and they're telling her different things like, no, you should do this first, or no, you should do this other thing first. And then there's the other model where you get one mentor at a time, kind of 6 weeks at a time. You've got a supply chain expert, and then you've got marketing expert and that kind of stuff. And we actually have stats on what type of model lends itself to more successful startups. Most people think it's the one where you have one mentor at a time. Most of my students will say, I would rather be at an accelerator that has one mentor at a time because I know what to do and I feel like I'm supported. But it turns out that what happens is the opposite. When you're given 20, 30 mentors who are giving you conflicting advice, where you have to wrestle with doubt, the likelihood of your business success is higher because you're starting to test those hypotheses a lot sooner. You're noticing, wait, expert A and expert B are telling me 2 different things about my logistics. Maybe I should go figure that out. And you're catching those risks faster than if you have one mentor at a time. What happens is you zigzag. You follow the marketing expert and you get another mentor and you go in this other direction. And so what happens is it feels more fun because it feels like you're making progress, but those businesses are not as successful. They don't last in ways that entrepreneurs who have to wrestle with doubt feel. So I thought that was a really fascinating study that kind of underlined the central themes of the book.
Totally counterintuitive. I would think that having somebody who just is one person who's more passionate about what it is that you're doing can help guide you through to success, whereas conventional wisdom is too many cooks spoil the broth, right? Like, I mean, anybody who's ever had a dilemma in their lives and who's had like everybody in their social circle offering advice, it can, like, a cacophony of perspectives can sometimes be overwhelming and can lead to stagnation, I would think, as opposed to progress.
Well, and it goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning, right? So you have that cacophony, and what do you do with it? Do you use it as an opportunity to learn, or do you use it as an excuse to get paralyzed or give up on the business, right? And I think if you're able to do the former, not the latter, your likelihood of success is higher.
So when presented with a dilemma, seek as many opinions, seek as much advice as you can.
Yeah, but treat them all as opinions and advice, none as the final arbiter of what you should do.
Got it.
Right? And that's the trap I think many people fall into is if you think about what these advisors or mentors are telling you as the final decision, then it feels more paralyzing to hear from all of these folks who are telling you to move in 20 different ways. But if you hear it as this is their opinion, their perspective to inform my judgment, then it's less debilitating.
That's very practical and totally counterintuitive. Wow, interesting. Yeah, because it could feel overwhelming. I mean, I know that whenever I've had but I guess, yeah, just to play devil's advocate to my own intuition, whenever I've personally had a dilemma, I've always generally intuitively sought as much, I've information gathered as much as I possibly could, and that usually in my life has led to positive outcomes.
Very cool.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming out. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with us. Super excited for this book. Who is the ideal reader? Like who do you write this book for?
I wrote this book for folks who are dealing with difficult decisions in their life, right? So that could be lots of different audiences, from an undergraduate who's like, I don't know what to major in, or what, who I want to be when I grow up, to an MBA student who is starting to lead a unit in a company after they've graduated, to a senior executive who's now tasked with making really difficult decisions at the intersection of finance and marketing and strategy. I think we all deal with doubt in different ways. The audience that I'm most facile with is kind of MBA plus or minus 5 years, right? Like 5 years before getting your MBA and 5 years after. Those are the folks that I hang out with the most. But I've also learned that these are dynamics that affect us all.
Yeah, for sure. Well, again, thanks for coming out. I've got one last question for you, but before we get to that, where can listeners pick up your book? Where can they find you on social media? How can they support your work?
Thanks so much for asking. The best way to connect with me on social media is LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from folks. And the book is available everywhere books are sold, starting tomorrow.
Love it. And yeah, I'm not sure when this goes up, but it'll probably be timed, in accordance with whenever the book releases. So yeah, definitely check it out, guys. Radical Doubt. The last question that gets asked to everybody on the show: what does living a genius life mean to you?
I think living a genius life is synonymous with for me, living a good life, a life that you're proud of, a life where you're able to set some goals and achieve those intentions and help other people while you're doing it.
Love it. Well, thanks, Bobby.
My pleasure, Max.
Yeah.
Wonderful to get to know you.
Likewise. Thanks, guys, for listening. Share this episode with people in your life who will benefit from it. And that's it. I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.